This is TWiT.
It's hard to forget 2020, right? Big year. It was the year of a pandemic and the year that the evil telecoms decided to remove their data caps for a short period of time, right? Well, that was unfortunately short-lived. Comcast has started to reactivate those data caps just as they were, well, still sheltering in place. People were still sheltering in place, and a good percentage of states are still in the pandemic and in sheltering in place rules are still in effect. Well, that's okay because the state of Massachusetts is responding to Comcast. State lawmakers have proposed a ban on data caps and new fees and price increases on home internet services for the pandemic duration. Say what? That's right. Thank you, Massachusetts, for starting the trend. Now, the legislation was filed on Tuesday this week by Democratic State Representative Andy Vargas and Dave Rogers. Now, Vargas has actually called the bill a response to Comcast's internet data cap plans, while Rogers said the goal is to push back at Comcast and any other service providers who try to raise prices or fees during a pandemic. Now, Verizon, Fios, and RCN also provide internet service in the Massachusetts area, but do not impose data caps, which is nice. Now, they also led a group of 71 Massachusetts lawmakers who urged Comcast to halt enforcement of its 1.2 terabyte monthly data cap as well. Now, they argued that the cap hurts low-income people and is unnecessary because Comcast's robust network can handle it. Now, while Comcast already enforced that data cap in 27 states for several years, the cable company brought the cap to the rest of its territories and an additional 12 states, including Massachusetts and the District of Columbia this month. Now, Comcast is easing in enforcement, so the first overage card charges for newly capped customers will actually be assessed for data usage in August billing cycle. That actually changed from April. Now, the bill proposes emergency law necessary for immediate preservation of public convenience. Now, it would remain in effect for the duration of the COVID-19 state of emergency that the Governor Charlie Baker declared in March 2020, and for at least 60 days after the state of emergency is declared to be ended. Now, moreover, ISPs would not be allowed to, quote, increase the costs of internet plans or, quote, levy any new fees or charges related to broadband service or shut off broadband internet access service or services for subscribers that are unable to pay due to overdue bills due to financial hardships caused by the COVID-19 emergency. Now, the proposal is to ban internet shutoffs is similar to a provision in the Keep Americans Connected pledge announced in March 2020 by then Federal Communication Commission's Chairman Ajit Pai. Now, Curtis, I want to bring you in here because, this sounds like Massachusetts is doing the right thing. What do you think?
Well, I'm in favor of getting rid of these limits. I mean, I'm a big fan of unlimited data, but I do have some sort of philosophical questions. And among them is, if capping people's data is a bad thing during a pandemic, why does it suddenly become better when people aren't sick? What is it about so many people being sick that makes us say, the normal scummy behavior that you have, we need to let you to be about 12% less scummy to make everything better? I think this is the sort of thing that should be the way the companies operate anyway. My real question, to be honest, is whether a law is the best way to do this. Now, I say this as someone who lives in a state, Florida, where they have similar laws regarding prices of goods and services following a hurricane. Price gouging is specifically disallowed by law, which means that if you've got, once a hurricane warning has gone up and the states of emergency that accompany that, you can't suddenly start charging $100 for a sheet of plywood. You can't suddenly start charging $50 for a crate of bottled water. Your prices have to be pretty much in line with what they were the day before the state of emergency, and there are legal consequences if they're not. This is an interesting thing about our sort of capitalist system where rules are bad until they're good. And I think that this is only one of this sort of law that we're going to see during and in the immediate aftermath of the COVID pandemic.
I agree. I think that, the interesting thing here is, most people are working remote. So they needed to have, a lot of people that I even work with are still using the consumer grade network connectivity because they can obviously get the faster speed packages for less than a business internet. And I have business internet, which means that, I have priority on the nodes and I have a little bit more reliability. They also have an SLA on servicing and so on and so forth. But also, I pay a premium price, and that means that also removes the cap. But a lot of people around here, they still just use the consumer stuff. And we had a power outage a couple weeks back, and a lot of people just couldn't do work, even on their laptops, because they didn't have any power to run. And plus, the consumer side went down. Now I could actually do work a little bit because actually my modem had a backup and it also had cellular and all this stuff. And so I was able to do all these things, again, paying a premium. But a lot of people can't afford to do that. And I think that's what's interesting here is consumers have bought into the faster speeds and the better packages, and they're using a ton more data now because they're sitting at home most of the time. But they are now used to doing that. So now these companies are saying, no, even though you're used to doing all that, you have to go back to the, even though you might still be at home, we're going to put the caps back on and we're going to start charging you. I'm actually glad that Massachusetts has started this ball rolling because I want the rest of the states to do it too. I want them to push back and say, like you said, you're being scummy here. You're being horrible, and you're poking at people who are still in a current state, and you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be taking advantage of consumers like that, and you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. So I hope that this gets better. Now, one thing I want to throw back to you, Curtis, then we can move on to the next bite. The new FCC chairwoman, she's just started. She's got a lot of work to do, but I'm wondering why she's kind of silent here. Obviously she's got a lot of things to do here. Do you think, Curtis, that the FCC should actually get involved here so they can actually kickstart the economy a bit more after the stimulus?
I think that we're likely to see more action from the FCC later. Why is she being quiet? I think a lot of it has to do with what the current administration's priorities are for the first few weeks of their administration. They've been awfully busy in a bunch of areas. But I do think that as attention swings to the pandemic recovery efforts and the stimulus package that will certainly be hitting Congress before too long, that we'll start to see responses from other parts of government as well, including the FCC. And if history is any indication, I think the current chairman does have a higher likelihood of being active in protecting consumers and less active in protecting the carriers. She's likely to feel that the carriers can take care of themselves and that it's the individual consumers who need protection. And, you were talking about data caps. I do want to throw out one additional consideration. We've been talking about business, and that's why we are this week in enterprise technology. But there are still an awful lot of kids doing school from home over video channels, and that soaks up a ton of capacity as well. I mean, think about your situation. If all of your children were of school age and all doing remote learning, you would your lines would glow a bright cherry red from all the data flowing through them during school hours. And there are a fair amount of the households in the country who have a situation like that. I mean, I notice in my neighborhood where we have a mix of kids who have gone back to in-school learning and remote, there are certain hours of the day when my response on the internet drops because I can tell when the big peak hours are for classroom interaction because we start seeing some lag. So a lot of things. And the one big piece that I do hope comes after this, we've talked in the past about the digital divide between the people who can afford true high-speed internet and those who can't. I'm hoping that one of the consequences and one of the good outcomes from all of the bad that's going on right now is that the digital divide narrows considerably when we get through all of this.